Most people read Dostoevsky for the big novels, Crime and Punishment, The Brothers Karamazov, The Idiot. But Notes from Underground is something different. It isn't a story in the traditional sense. There's no hero's journey, no dramatic arc, no transformation. What you get instead is a man speaking directly to you, without filters, without pretense, just pure corrosive honesty. He's not asking for sympathy, he's not even asking to be understood. What he offers is a confession, raw, uncomfortable, and intellectually sharp. He wants to expose something most people spend their lives avoiding. The part of the self that resents, sabotages, and overanalyzes everything. The part that's so aware of its own weakness that it turns that weakness into a point of pride. This isn't fiction as escape, this is fiction as exposure. And in just under 150 pages, Dostoevsky dismantles the Enlightenment idea of rational man, the liberal dream of social harmony, and even the romantic myth of salvation through love. What's left is the underground man, bitter, self-aware, and trapped in a psychological spiral of his own making. To understand what Dostoevsky is really doing here, you don't need symbolic theories or poetic language, you just need to listen. Because Notes from Underground is less a novel and more a diagnostic tool.
The underground man
Begins not with a story, but with a declaration. I am a sick man. I am a spiteful man. Right away, he separates himself from the reader. He doesn't want your agreement. He wants to confront you with discomfort. What follows is not a tale of illness in the physical sense, but in the existential one. His real sickness is overconsciousness, the state of thinking too much, feeling too much, and never being able to act without self-doubt dragging you down. He positions himself against the man of action, the kind of person who moves through life with simplicity, who feels anger and expresses it, who sees a goal and pursues it. The underground man can't do that. His thoughts interrupt themselves. Every emotion is followed by its analysis, every decision is undermined by hesitation. He's not paralyzed by external forces, he's paralyzed by his own inner commentary. He calls this heightened awareness a disease, and in a sense, he's right. It isolates him. It cuts him off, not only from others, but from the flow of life itself. Action becomes impossible when every motive is questioned. What looks like cowardice is really a kind of inward collapse. And what appears as resentment is the inevitable byproduct of knowing too much and doing too little. But here's the twist. He's proud of it. His suffering gives him a strange moral authority. He claims to be more honest, more aware, more real than those who blindly live. He's built an identity around his failure, a fortress made of contradictions. He mocks others, but hates himself. He hides from society, but longs to be seen. Every sentence he writes is both a confession and a defense. This first chapter doesn't tell us a story. It introduces a condition. In Chapter 2, Dostoevsky sharpens the underground man's philosophical edge. If Chapter 1 introduces his condition, overconsciousness, self-loathing, inaction, then Chapter 2 begins to explain what he believes caused it, the lie of human rationality. He opens by attacking a central 19th century belief that human beings are fundamentally rational, that they act in their best interests, and that if we just built the right system, legal, moral, economic, everyone would live peacefully and productively. It's the foundation of Enlightenment thinking, utilitarianism, and all utopian visions that followed. The underground man doesn't just disagree with this view, he dismantles it. He argues that human beings don't always want what's good for them. More than that, they often want what's bad, not by accident, not out of ignorance, but deliberately. He says people will ruin their own plans just to prove they're free. They'll choose suffering over logic, destruction over harmony, because nothing insults human dignity more than being treated like a machine that always picks the optimal outcome. This is where his argument becomes brutally clear. If everything in life could be predicted, calculated, and controlled, then human beings would rebel. Not because they're noble, not because they're smart, but because deep down, they need the ability to say no, even if that no leads to chaos. His attack is also aimed at the Crystal Palace, a reference to Nikolai Chernyshevsky's vision of a rational socialist utopia where all human behavior is systematized and all desires satisfied. The underground man hates this idea. He says if you built such a palace, clean, efficient, moral, someone would still smash a window just to assert themselves. That's what human freedom looks like. Not perfect harmony, but the refusal to be reduced to a formula. He gives a biting example. Even if science proved that a certain action would lead to happiness, a person might still refuse to do it. Why? Just to show that they're not predictable. This isn't a philosophical point, it's psychological realism. We see it today in self-sabotage, addiction, procrastination, and the compulsive rejection of authority. People don't always want what's good. They want what's theirs, even if it ruins them. The famous line comes here, man needs only independent volition, whatever that independence may cost and wherever it may lead. That's the core, not happiness, not security, but the ability to choose, even if the choice is irrational, painful, or self-defeating. To the underground man, the Enlightenment's dream of universal happiness is naive, even dangerous, because it ignores the stubborn, irrational core of human nature. It assumes people want to be predictable, safe, and good. But history and personal experience shows otherwise. So Chapter 2 isn't about philosophy in the abstract. It's about the limits of any worldview that tries to define human beings by logic alone. Dostoevsky is issuing a warning. If you build a world that treats people like rational animals, don't be surprised when they destroy it. After laying out his philosophical opposition to rationality and utopian ideals, the underground man shifts to something more personal, but no less revealing. Chapter 3 marks a turn from abstract ideas to lived experience, though the line between the two remains intentionally blurred. It's not a conventional memory, it's a case study in resentment. He recounts an incident that, on the surface, is completely trivial. Years ago, an officer once moved him aside on the street without even looking at him. The physical slight wasn't violent or dramatic, but the emotional fallout lasted years. He replays it constantly, imagines confrontations, fantasizes about restoring his dignity. The detail is small, the obsession is enormous. What Dostoevsky is showing here is how humiliation, especially when unprocessed, becomes a kind of fuel. The underground man doesn't react in the moment. He lacks the impulsive simplicity of someone who punches back. Instead, he internalizes the insult. He carries it, nurtures it, reshapes it into a narrative of victimhood and superiority. His inability to act becomes part of his identity. He tries to solve the problem in his head, as if thinking deeply enough could restore his lost dignity. He imagines scenarios in which he bumps into the officer and refuses to move, forcing a confrontation on equal terms. But even in these imagined victories, he doubts himself. Would he really do it? Would it change anything? Is he just pathetic? Eventually, he does attempt to walk into the officer on the street, literally bump into him, shoulder to shoulder, as an act of silent rebellion. When it happens, it's nothing. The officer doesn't even notice. There's no fight, no victory, not even acknowledgement. All the emotional energy he built up collapses into a moment of complete insignificance. This is the reality of the underground mindset, immense emotional intensity directed at small, symbolic acts. It's not about justice, it's about restoring a fragile sense of agency in a world that constantly ignores you. And yet, even when the moment comes, it's hollow, because the deeper issue isn't the insult itself, but the internal structure of a man who has no stable self-worth to begin with. More importantly, the underground man knows all of this. He's not deceived. He tells us exactly what he's doing. He exposes himself before anyone else can. That's part of his defense. If he can humiliate himself in public, he takes away your power to do it for him. But that self-exposure isn't healing. It's corrosive. It reinforces his isolation and deepens his bitterness. Chapter 3 isn't about a confrontation. It's about how the mind weaponizes memory to create meaning where none exists, and how that meaning becomes a trap. The underground man doesn't want to forget the insult. He wants to keep it alive, because in the absence of dignity, resentment becomes identity. This chapter takes the abstract themes of Part 1, irrationality, freedom, spite, and grounds them in a small, almost laughable story. But that's the point. This is not a grand tragedy. It's a slow suffocation by 1,000 petty cuts. In Chapter 4, Dostoevsky moves us from private obsession to public humiliation. This is the underground man's attempt to re-enter society, not as reconciliation, but as a test. He's not looking for friendship, he's looking for proof that he can still assert himself, still matter, still be seen. The setting? A farewell dinner for an old schoolmate, Zverkov, a man he simultaneously despises and envies. The dinner is symbolic, but not in a literary sense. It's a pressure test for the underground man's entire psychological structure. He decides to attend, not out of camaraderie, but out of wounded pride. He wants to show that he belongs, that he's superior to these shallow men who've succeeded in ways he hasn't. But from the moment he arrives, the power dynamics are clear. He's the outsider. He's not respected, he's not even fully invited. His presence is barely tolerated. He tries to control the interaction by speaking formally, intellectually, and with forced dignity. But it's obvious he's out of place. The others joke, drink, reminisce. He criticizes, lectures, and sulks. He's trying to assert his superiority, but what comes through is desperation. He needs their validation while pretending not to care about it. It's a familiar pattern. reject others before they can reject you, but hope they admire you anyway. The peak of this humiliation is his challenge to Zverkov. He drunkenly implies that Zverkov is a fraud and tries to provoke a duel. It's not bravery, it's performance. A last attempt to claw back status by pretending to follow the rules of honor, even as everyone sees through it. Zverkov ignores him. The rest laugh. The duel never happens. There's no confrontation, just exposure. The underground man isn't feared or respected, he's irrelevant. The deeper point here isn't that he fails socially, it's that he wants to fail. Because social acceptance would require compromise, politeness, humility, ordinary human interaction, and he can't tolerate that. He's built his identity on rejection, on being different, on being intellectually and morally superior. But the cost is isolation, and now public shame. This is not an indictment of the others at the table. They're not evil, they're not particularly admirable either. But they exist in a shared social reality, one the underground man refuses to accept. His failure isn't their cruelty. It's his inability to engage in even basic human rituals without turning them into moral theater. By the end of the dinner, he's alone again, not by accident, but by design. He wanted to dominate. Instead, he collapses, socially, psychologically, emotionally. Chapter 4 is Dostoevsky at his most precise. He's showing what happens when resentment meets real people, not in grand gestures or dramatic betrayal, but in quiet awkwardness. Contempt disguised as wit and the self-inflicted wound of needing to win a game no one else is playing. If the dinner was about social collapse, Chapter 5 is about something more intimate and more painful. Emotional control, vulnerability, and the inability to love without destroying. After the failed dinner, the underground man follows the other men to a brothel, not out of desire, but out of humiliation. He's spiraling. He doesn't want sex, he wants power. Something he can still control after being socially erased. That's where he meets Liza, a young prostitute. She becomes the target of his next performance, not of charm or seduction, but of moral superiority. He delivers a long, condescending monologue to her. He paints a bleak picture of her future, poverty, disease, death, and positions himself as the only one brave enough to tell her the truth. On the surface, he's trying to save her, but underneath, he's doing what he always does, asserting control through judgment. He doesn't care about Liza as a person. He cares about feeling powerful in the face of his own failures. And yet, something unexpected happens. Liza listens. She doesn't respond with anger or mockery. She sees pain behind his words. And later, to his surprise and discomfort, she visits him. It's not pity, it's recognition. She believes he might be someone worth understanding. She shows up ready for connection, and he panics. Faced with someone who sees him, not the mask, not the bitterness, but the actual person underneath, he lashes out. He mocks her, demeans her, offers her money. She has reached out with genuine human emotion, and he responds with cruelty. Why? Because vulnerability threatens the one thing he has left, control over his isolation. Her visit reveals the ultimate flaw in the underground man's identity. He claims to want truth, to see through illusions, to reject false virtue. But when confronted with something real, empathy, affection, emotional risk, he can't handle it. His entire worldview depends on the assumption that connection is false, that love is manipulation, and that sincerity is weakness. So when someone offers it honestly, he has no framework for receiving it. He breaks down after she leaves. He weeps. Not for her, but for himself. For his inability to do anything other than destroy what he most secretly longs for. This final chapter is the clearest expression of what Dostoevsky's building through the whole book. The underground man isn't just a man of ideas. He's a man trapped by his own defense mechanisms. He's intelligent enough to see through lies, but too afraid to live in truth. He wants dignity, but can't bear the humility that real dignity requires. Liza wasn't a savior. She wasn't a symbol. She was a real person who offered a real connection. And that's exactly why she had to be pushed away. Because in the underground, nothing can survive except resentment and self-pity. There's no redemption arc, no lesson learned. The underground man ends where he began, isolated, bitter, and fully aware of his own contradictions. And that's the point. Notes from Underground doesn't solve a problem. It exposes one, the kind we carry inside, the kind that hides behind intellect, bitterness, and a refusal to be seen. If this breakdown helped you see Notes from Underground with sharper clarity, share it with someone who still thinks Dostoevsky is just about crime and punishment. And if you're the kind of person who overthinks everything, questions your own motives, or feels stuck between awareness and action, you're not alone. That's what this book is really about. Subscribe for more deep dives into books that don't offer easy answers but make you harder to lie to, including by yourself.